Hello and welcome to another Giant Slayer TFT how to play video. Today our analyst will be diving into how to play Yone Academy for the very first patch of set 6, 11.22. With so much being new, it's good to fall back onto a comp that's relatively straightforward to play, which is where Yone Academy comes in. We'll be covering when to play this composition along with the core build, items, and augments. To end with, we'll do a brief overview of each stage of the game. With all that said, let's go ahead and get started. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come. Be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. To begin with, let's talk about when to play Yone Academy. In set 6, it can be possible to force the same comp every game, though it isn't ideal to do so. This is because augments can drastically alter the flow of the game. That means another composition may become suddenly viable, so forcing the same thing over and over is just inefficient. But for the current compositions, if you want to build you can try to hard force game after game, then Yone Academy is the comp for you. One of the reasons is that Yone Academy is so good, and why it's a top tier comp is that Yone, being a 4-cost champion, is not all that difficult to find. A lot of other compositions either rely on specific augments, emblems, items, or 5-cost champions, but not Yone. So to answer the question of when to play Yone, the answer can literally be whenever you want. The more nuanced response is when you have a strong opening that leads into a fast level 8 where you can comfortably hit Yone 2. Items and augments do play a part here, but we'll get more to the specifics of those later on. Before we do, let's talk about the core champions and traits for Yone Academy. As the name of the composition implies, the goal here is to find a Yone 2 and somewhere between 4 and 6 Academy. In addition to that, you'll want at least 2 Challenger, and any support trait after that is just icing on the cake. Socialite, Enchanter, Clockworker, and Enforcer are all great additions. But what is the core composition? The standard build is going to be Yone, Yumi, Leona, Lux, Katarina, Fiora, and Jace, along with an additional Academy champion, any of which will do. This nets you 6 Academy, 2 Challenger, and 2 Enforcer. Nice and simple and easy to put together. There are a lot of variations, though, that you can go for. For example, 8 Academy is the capped version for this build. The reason for that is the scaling Yone gets from Academy is crazy good, especially the bonus AD that means you can skimp on pure damage items and aim for utility. To comfortably play 8 Academy, you need emblems or augments, so it's not possible every game, which is why 6 Academy is the standard variation. Another variation drops 2 Academy and adds 2 Challenger. It's less about Yone at that point and more about distributing the power in your composition to Fiora, Samira, or Kaisa. Definitely viable, but don't expect to hit quite as hard as 6 Academy Yone. And then there's the extreme version of which is 6 Challenger, which again is less about Yone and more about champions like Fiora and Samira. Beyond those builds, well, you can really go into any type of variation utilizing Academy, Challenger, and Clockwork. The main thing to consider is what augments you have, items, and whether your board is going to lack frontline and CC. Figure out all of those elements, and the sky's the limit to the number of potential variations that Yone carry can have. Now that we talked about the build and variations, what are some of the potential transitions when looking to play Yone Academy? The most obvious pivot is going to be Fiora carry. How to do this is simple. Give the items meant for Yone to Fiora and add in extra challengers. There's certainly more to it than that, but Fiora and Yone are quite close in how you go about playing them, which means pivoting into Fiora should feel natural. Since Yone uses a lot of Academy champions, it makes sense to transition into another Academy carry if Yone doesn't pan out. Lux is the best option here when you have mostly AP items, but don't expect to do quite as well as you would with Yone. Think of Lux more as a top 4 composition while Yone is a top 2. But it may be necessary to switch up your game plan if you're unable to find Yone 2 and hit Lux 2 easily. The other option for an Academy carry is Katarina with Assassins. This generally is done before you would look to play Yone because the goal with Katarina is to 3-star her. So the best time to make this transition is when you're in stage 3 and hit a bunch of Katarinas, meaning re-rolling is viable. The plus side to this is that Katarina uses a few items that both Lux and Yone use, so if you're continually not hitting Cat 3, you can pivot off of her. In the late game, there's quite a few options for when you can't find Yone or 2-star him, which can be improbable due to other players contesting. Jace and Jinx are both fantastic options, particularly Jace, as he can be a beastly carry. Another common late game pivot is Kaisa, though she's not all that reliable and requires more of a compositional shift than the other options. All in all, there's a lot of options whether you're playing Yone or having to transition away from him, which is why it's one of the best ways to climb rank currently. With composition and transitions covered, let's talk about the core items. Yone is quite unique in that there's a plethora of item options that can all do well on him. That's because both Academy and Challenger are scaling synergies, so as a baseline champion, Yone is already gaining increased attack speed, AD, and AP. In addition to that, his ability provides extra damage and healing. With so much packed into one champion, that means items can be a lot more flexible. The best in slot is generally Runins with a defensive item and some type of damage. That's not a hard rule to follow because you can skate by without a damage item if you're running 6 or 8 Academy as an example. But the core items to look for are Runins, Quicksilver, and either Infinity Edge or Giant Slayer. That provides the best balance of damage, utility, and defensiveness. That said, there's plenty of other options such as Titan's Resolve, Hand of Justice, Bloodthirster, Rage Blade, and Guardian Angel. Basically, don't fret it if you don't have the perfect items for Yone, because chances are there will be something to give him. The rest of your items can be distributed as you see fit, but will depend on your build. If you're playing fewer Academy champions and more challengers, then look to give items to Fiora, Samira, or Kaisa to act as a secondary DPS. Jace is always a viable item holder, with AD items being preferred in the backline and defensive items for the front. At the end of the day, the rest of your items don't really matter all that much as long as you've secured 3 good ones for Yone. Next, we can go over some Hex Tech augments that pair well with Yone. We'll be skipping augments that are good in general, like the Rich Get Richer or Sunfire Board. Instead, we'll focus on ones that directly help the Yone composition. Keep in mind that these are just suggestions because every game is different and none of these augments may be available. The most obvious beneficial augments are the Emblem, Heart, and Soul augments for Academy and Challenger. These open up your board to add in a more diverse range of champions. It also means things like 8 Academy become an option. We recommend picking these on 3-3 or 4-6 since you may not always be committing to these compositions. It is fine to grab them on 1-4, but it does lock you into a certain build path. There's a lot of emblem options to give Yone, but for the most part, none of them are that standout. Instead, the best all-around trait augment is going to be Socialite if the Hex is somewhere in the first 2 rows. Positioning matters a lot for Yone, so having him sitting in the back just really isn't that great, so only take a Socialite augment if it will benefit him. One of the best non-trait augments is Knife's Edge, especially at higher tiers. The increased attack damage means you don't really need a damage item on Yone, plus you're generally running a lot of other auto-attack champions that are benefiting from this. Other beneficial augments at scale are things like Celestial Blessing, Stand United, and Thrill of the Hunt. None of these are particularly amazing, but do add extra utility for Yone. And another top-tier choice is Titanic Force because it lets you put a Warmogs on Yone. Not only does this give him extra health, but increases his damage, making it more likely for him to survive in fights. Overall, there's a lot of viable augments, with quite a few of them being situational. Our recommendation is looking for generic items that buff Yone and the rest of the comp instead of just specific options that may not pan out. That said, don't skip on a really good tier 3 augment because a lot of them can be game winning. Finally, we can start breaking down each stage of the game, beginning with the early game. From the opening carousel, the best component for a Yone composition is generally glove, sword, or bow. Of the 3, glove will be more flexible than the others, but all of them are great and usable in multiple ways. In stage 1 and 2, the game plan should be to win streak. Win streaking is the easiest way to comfortably play for a fast level 8, which is the main goal when looking to play Yone Academy. In order to do this, try to play your strongest opening board you can. Right now, there's a few options, but one of the best and most consistent is Scrap, Innovator, Clockwork. These 3 synergies work well together and provide a hard-to-kill board in the early rounds of the game. Once you hit stage 3, you can pivot out of it, but for stage 2, it's a top-tier option. Into stage 3 in the mid-game, where you'll want to begin holding onto Academy champions. Having the low-cost champions ready to go will make the board pivot on level 7 and 8 a lot easier, especially if those champions are already upgraded. In general, stage 3 is not all that exciting, just make sure you're leveling to 6 no later than 3-2 to give yourself the best chance of hitting a 4-cost champion. And then we're into stage 4, where it's time to hit level 7 and roll for a bit of gold. Don't roll too much here, especially if you've been winning. The idea is to try and find 1 or 2 relevant 4-cost champions and upgrade your Academy units if possible. Keep in mind that Yone is often heavily contested, so you do want to be scouting at this point of the game to see who is contesting. If it looks doomed, pivot. Finally, the late game. Sometime between 4-5 and 5-3, you should be leveling to 8, preferably earlier if possible. From there, you roll, hit Yone 2, and toss in the rest of your board. Level 9 is doable with this composition, but you need Yone 2 and a solid front line. Ideally, you want to find Yumi as she replaces a weaker Academy champion. The rest of the late game is about positioning, which can be difficult if you're using Socialite. Of course, if you're continually losing because of Socialite, then be willing to move Yone off of it. But the general idea is to keep Yone away from Tahm Kench, don't get perma-CC'd by champions like Orianna, and maximize the potential damage your secondary DPS can do in case your Yone gets killed early on. That's the quick and simple way to play the late game with Yone Academy. And that's all for today, folks. Set 6 has been a blast so far, but we've definitely seen the meta trend heavily towards Yone because of how well-rounded he is as a carry. There's definitely other viable options, but if you just want to climb rank quickly, then we highly recommend playing this comp. Let us know in the comment section below which composition you would like us to cover in our next How to Play video. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.